So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight this is a launch of what I will be considering more podcasts on my love of the Who. We're going to start with the fourth rock opera in their oeuvre. Now, we all remember a quick one while he's away. Who Sell Out was sort of a rock opera. Then we had Tommy, which had great success on the stage, on the screen, quadraphonic, and this is where we get into number four. We're going to talk about the film version of their rock opera Quadrophenia. Now, the Oberlu released the Quadrophenia, the movie, to their own production company, and was loosely based on the Who's rock opera of the same name from 1973. Now, the movie was directed by Frank Rodham, and it actually was his feature directing debut, and he had a great opening salvo in his direction. Um, Now, get this: Quadrophenia is not a musical. Tommy was a musical, and the band does not appear live in Quadrophenia, even though it did appear in Tommy in their 1970s gear. But this is a period of time where we call the mods of England at the time, who were trying to find direction as baby boomers, and their ongoing emotional battle against their arch enemies, the rockers. Now, the film stars Phil Daniels as Jimmy, who's a young 1960s London-based mod who escapes from his dead-end job as a mailroom boy by dancing, partying, taking drugs, riding his scooter, and brawling with the motorcycle-riding rockers. Now, you would think that the young Brits that had a lot of money, disposable money, would not see the dead end of their lives, but the reason why the mods and the rockers rose is that they wanted direction, because they felt at the time that the British aristocracy and the old-fashioned Britain was not giving them what they wanted. And you had the rock and roll movement that started with Skiffle and Elvis and Chuck Berry and all these different people led into the who were heavily influenced by that type of black music, or maximum R&B as we call it. Now, in this film, Phil Daniels kind of looks like a low rent Pete Townsend if he had a baby with Roger Daltrey. He's a very, very over the top character, very charismatic, but he has undiagnosed mental issues because he has massive problems dealing with his sexual emotions, his physical emotions. He's feuding with his parents. He feels his parents. He still lives at home. His parents don't really understand him. His sister doesn't understand him, and he goes deeper and deeper into kind of self-induced. What about me? Now, as the plot goes along, he and his friends decide to go to Brighton to escape the humdrum of their regular lives. And what was happening at the time, there was a lot of mod versus rockers battles at these resort areas or these holiday camps, as the dear departed Keith Moon once called it. And it happened in Brighton. And at this brawl, he's arrested, and his life starts to actually go out of control, if that's even possible, for the negativity that's going on in his life. And he has trouble in the movie getting a girlfriend. He does get one, the beautiful Leslie Ash, and he starts to have a almost like a, not say a homosexual fascination, but an admiration, fascination to the Ace Face mod, played by, of all people, Gordon Sumner, Sting, who I think was robbed for Best Supporting Actor nomination at the Oscars and the Globes and the BAFTAs, but that's just me. Now, not to give away the plot of the movie too much, if it involves music involving The Who, you know it's going to be tremendously put together. Now, Johnny Rotten, actually, of the Sex Pistols, screen tested for Jimmy, but he felt he wasn't insurable for the movie, and Phil Daniels was chosen. I don't think Johnny Rotten could have done the mod justice, because Johnny Rotten was neither a mod or a rocker. He was a mocker, say like Ringo Starr. Johnny Rotten believed all music was terrible, and he should know he was singing it. And even though he changed rock history, he would have been a terrible fit here. Now, over the years, Quadrophenia movie, which actually was kind of devastating for the Who, because when Keith Moon died in '78, there was some question if they're going to go ahead with the movie version of Quadrophenia, and he decided to go ahead and tribute to Keith Moon. And I'll be talking a little bit more about Moon the Loon in an upcoming podcast, because I thought about today, do I just stay with Quadrophenia? Because if anybody knows me, my friends and family, I'm the biggest Who fan that probably Northern New Brunswick has ever seen. I talk in Who speak sometimes. I use one-liners. I can quote the songs verbatim in public with no, like I'm a total non sequitur with the Who. But if you bring up the Who with me, you might see a little bit of Jimmy Rise or Pete Townsend or even Daltrey. I believe it wouldn't be for the Who, I wouldn't have got through my teen years, because as a mentally concussed youth for most of my earlier years, because of the meningitis and the beatings I used to get at school, and by bullies and stuff, I couldn't retain too much until the age of 14 or 13. And I lash on to Who as to understand how music can, change you and motivate you. And that's when Quadrophenia came out. I was surprised. There was no musical aspect to it besides the soundtrack. And the soundtrack's not just the Who. You had the Kinks, you had different key artists from the early 60s. But Phil Daniels gives a great performance here. Like, Daniels is very underrated as an actor, and is probably ranks as one of the best, I not say teen performances, but early 20s performances by a British actor in 1970s. Now, get this. Now, the soundtrack for Quadrophenia, the movie, is not like a soundtrack or the LP or CD of the original Quadrophenia, because the album only contains 10 of the 17 tracks from the original rock opera. Now, there are different mixes as well. Some are extended, and John Entwistle did a great job. Now, the most notable difference, of course, was the opening sequence called "A Real Me," which actually Entwistle gave a better bass track on it, and with a more prominent vocals and a better ending. Now, some of the tracks are edited to be slightly shorter, and the soundtrack also includes 3 tracks by the Who. Talked about that did not appear on the album. Now, this was all on location. There was only one scene filmed in the studio. For locations, shoot is quite good, but the some of the DVD has the description track or the audio commentary talks of some of the tricks that the producers and directors and the stars used to bring forth. Now, I would consider the angry young Brit movies, a little bit of French cinema, a little bit about the British and American Canadian pop movies through the years. It was considered probably the first of the 1980s punk style, not say music but films. It was very, very dominant, and it basically preambled a lot of the video style we saw on MTV and Much Music, and Top of the Pops. And it was called an anti-musical, and I think that really sums it up. Now Rotten Tomatoes is one of the few movies that 100% rating. It has reviews from 11 critics, and each one of them give the top rating. Now, Universal Home Entertainment first released the film on DVD in '99 with an 8-minute montage featurette. It used the VHS print, which I saw originally, and that's just terrible. On August 7, 2006, improved on the original DVD with Region 2 2-disc special edition, and it was digitally remastered as well. Now, I talked about the audio commentary, and the Criterion Collection actually put out a special edition on 28th of August 2012 on DVD and Blu-ray, which includes a lot of the extra special features and stuff, and talk about the punk revolution. Now, you got to understand, it's the 40th anniversary of Quadrophenia this year, and I think really people have forgotten it in a lot of ways, and I'll tell you why. Quadrophenia and the Who are a band of its time. Sure, you get the Roger Daltrey, you won't get fooled again, the Who and Pete Townsend and all that. But Quadrophenia, to really understand this, you got to be born in that period or live through the period from 1965 to about 1973 or 74, where you had the pretty boy bands and the rockers and stuff like that. But that population explosion in England that peaked 63 to 67, there was all kind of waves. There was the model wave and the Beatles and the different bands, the Kinks, the Animals and stuff like that. To be a Who fan, you had to pick up, make sure your scooter wouldn't be smashed by the rockers. You sometimes had to fight to prove you were right. I don't need to be forgiven. That's the total relation to the mods. And the way the Who was presented was as a pop band. He had like pop shirts and stuff like that. They predated the Monkees, but the way the Who were presented, there was almost like a homosexual or a bisexual angle to it. Like a lot of the mods were very pretty young men. The original Who, I mean, there was, Keith Moon was not a bad looking guy. Roger Daltrey, Townsend. There was sort of like a hidden aspect to it that was not in the Beatles. Nobody ever say that Ringo had homosexual overtones. I mean, for a lot of people, Roger Daltrey and Townsend admitted he had some, experimentation with homosexuality through the years, and you can see the subtext in Townsend's presentation and writing. You kind of see that in Quadrophenia, like a young man is very confused as what the portion of his life is going to mean, because he can put something, flashers on his bike, and he could, steal photos where he was playing and masturbate to him. That's a very famous scene in there. But I mean, what it was like to be a mod. You didn't know what the future was going to be like. You're only living for the weekend, and 40 years later, these mods are 62, 63, 64, like the 1970s mods. But predating that, they're in their 70s and 80s now. Can you believe that? It was such a time of youth, but it doesn't relate to any other rock and roll genre because it had its lingo, it had its music. I mean, it had such a short lifespan. Like the true mods were no more than 2 or 3 years, and even though the music lived on and the artists lived on, like the Kinks and different bands like that, the Who, of course. Quadrophenia is a movie of its time. The only thing I can really compare to is the Brat Pack movies of the 80s. That's a specific genre where only those actors could have performed. Only the Who could have written Quadrophenia. There was no other mod band like the Who, because when they're at the top of the mountaintop, you could try to rip off the Who, but how do you rip off perfection? For a lot of people, the Who is the greatest band of all time, and I tell you why. Because the Beatles were loved by the girls, but no woman in her right mind would be a big fan of the Who, because they were a dangerous macho band. And the homosexual overtones, which a lot of people don't talk about, but it's very prevalent. If you watch Quadrophenia start to finish, it's kind of it's a lot of subtext in there, a lot of subtext. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have a chance, give Quadrophenia a chance, especially the introduction, the 5 or 10 minutes. But if you see, a Vespa pass by, or if you see someone with kind of a mod look, and you're basically saying, did he get that, from the Who, or just that they're mimicking their great grandfather or whatever? You see, I'm a mod. I've never been a rocker, but I like rock music. But the mod aesthetic, we have a certain ways that we want to be the best we can be, and a lot of them are flawed. Most mods are flawed, like I am, and we always try to get better. And when Ringo said he's a mocker, I think I mean, it's facetious, but hey man, when you had to be a mod back then, you had to back it up. But if you have a chance, watch Quadrophenia and Tommy back to back if you can do it, and see how the musical aspect of Tommy was kind of reflected in Quadrophenia, and see how it links a little bit. But if you also have a chance, listen to the commentary track. It's quite interesting, especially a certain scene where I guess the light was so perfect. We've never seen a lighted scene like that in British film history ever again. So it's quite interesting. So on this Wednesday night, when we see Colorado and San Jose fighting for the right to basically divorce the Smithereens in the Western Conference NHL Finals, we wish you best of luck. And to everybody out there, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. You may go far if you smash your guitar.